What I'm doing here is taking what's always worked in the functional space, but then using science, using medicine, and just putting it together. And so what we've done very successfully is helped over thousands of individuals do just that, successfully wean off the medications and maintain their weight. And GLP-1s are expensive as hell. So the access alone is a concern because we don't have a big company making money off of researching these sort of lifestyle interventions. So they're always going to be shunned. They're always going to be denied. And you're either going to be the individual who's going to listen to what the powers that be tell you. I think because of that, it's a healthcare system that's set up to handle the problem in front of the patient because that's going to be met with the most instant gratification. And from a business model, that's a great business model. Doctors become doctors to think critically, to think on their feet, to use the data, to use the research, but look at what's in front of them and think critically. Sometimes critically means what's not in the research or what maybe hasn't been proven. And I think the GLP-1 space.
We've always had the benefit over the years of knowing providers, clinicians from East to West Coast. I mean, you just went to Hawaii not too long ago. And we've always stayed tip of the spear with the most, not just most innovative, because that's not important if it doesn't include applicability. And even when these GLP-1s first came out, there seemed to be hype, but of course there was a ton of skepticism in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
And then it was like a meteor shower. I mean, it was ubiquitous. You couldn't avoid them. You had celebrities jumping on this stuff. I mean, it was literally everywhere you looked. It was insane. I mean, we were there for HCG and phentermine and all the rest, but nothing really felt like this. I look back at it now. What do you think was the reason that this hit the market so hard and just swept the nation so quickly?
Yeah, I think it's really is as simple as the fact that this is the most powerful tool, and we'll talk about why I call it a tool. This is the most powerful medication. This is the best medication that we've ever had at helping people battle so many different issues, the ones that we talk about, the ones that they're FDA approved for, obesity, diabetes, but really because they get to the root cause, insulin resistance. We've never had a medication ever address insulin resistance. So it really is the first medication of its kind, GLP-1s, and they're making them better and better.
Yeah.
So it really is that simple.
We also now have had a lot of time to dive into some of the early research and to get, more importantly, feedback from a lot of patients and a lot of the data and statistics. And, I have been fortunate enough, and I know you have too. I was going to say hundreds, but at this point, have spoken to thousands of patients. And it seems like there are some repeating aspects, repeating issues that people are running into, whether it's having to increase dosing so quickly that I feel like they're taking gallons of this stuff eventually. They're encountering side effects that are really starting to derail them. They're hitting points where the results aren't coming the same way like they were before, even though they think they should be. What's the reason, or what are the reasons for these sudden challenges now?
Yeah, and I think, really I left out one key point.
Yeah.
The medications address insulin resistance head on, but it's the fact that they also suppress food chatter and they also suppress hunger because you really can't fix insulin resistance if an individual is still eating like crap, if they're still eating in excess. So which one's more important? That's a very challenging question. I think they're both equally important. And there's something about the combination of both making somebody more sensitive to insulin and removing that food chatter that allows them to better eat a plethora of whole nutritious food and less processed garbage. Yeah, it's the combination of both that really is the perfect storm. I was like, wow, I left that one out. So, okay, now what is sort of going wrong, right? Like, and I think the why behind the issues, that's rather challenging because when I look at the issues, we really have three types. We have individuals being crashed into weight loss plateaus because they're in starvation mode, and they don't even know that they're starving because they feel like they're not hungry when you take too much of the medications. We have people being crashed at weight loss plateaus. We have also this phenomena of people regaining all their weight. That's already proven in the data. Within 1 year of stopping semaglutide, 70% of the weight was regained. But then just the overall approach, kind of what you were saying, it's really interesting. So the data, the protocols that were established in the research, is every 4 weeks you increase the dose.
Yeah.
So for semaglutide, for example, an individual starts at 0.25, and after 4 weeks you go to 0.5, and then after 4 weeks you go to 1, and you keep working your way up to the maximum dose. Tirzepatide, 2.5 milligrams, then 5, then 10 and 15. And I've seen some little variations, but generally, let's increase the dose at 4 weeks. And I couldn't tell you how many patients just on today's live, when someone said, yeah, I was feeling great at 0.5, doctor told me to go to 1, and now I feel like shit. I'm not going to blame the doctor yet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the individual actually needed to go to 1. I had my hunch. And so I asked the individual on my live, what was the reasoning why you went to 1? Did you feel like you never felt the suppression to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel like you were feeling it and then it wore off? Did the weight loss stop? Like, had you never lost weight? Like, was there a logical in the doc? She was like, no, I was doing great. I was losing weight. And the doctor said, it's time to increase. And I said, okay. And I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. And look, you can flat out call that malpractice, but I see this sort of theme that it's like we have this almost robotic and dogmatic approach right now. And I think there's a lot of reasons to that. It's
Mm-hmm.
new. People are still figuring it out. And there's such a large explosion of people using it. And it is obesity. It is a weight loss in of itself that has its own intricacy. Not enough clinical reasoning that I'm seeing that's happening, and a lot of just cookie cutter templates. And so, the why these 3 issues are going on, I think maybe just the time, the explosion, the rapid nature of the amount of people using it. Because with any medication, more and more time, more and more use, more and more understanding. But I think this has just been so fast and we're figuring it out. And I think 5 years from now, we're going to know so much more as to what are the best practices.
Yeah, let me hold you there. You brought up a really interesting dichotomy. It was you have kind of what's the patient's responsibility, and then whoever's helping the patient, hopefully the provider. My stepmom, she's been in medicine her whole life. I remember being a kid and she was doing night shift. Now she's in Hawaii. And I had this conversation with her, and it seems like, yes, there are doctors who only write prescriptions and that's it. Take this, here you go. You come back, now also take this. But what she told me, there's also kind of an issue on the patient side where some providers are met with so much non-compliance when they do try to give those directives, lose interest over time because it's never accepted, right? And so when you look at those two aspects, how can patients truly be guided on these GLP-1s in a way that's going to lead to transformative results? Like what's actually necessary in culmination to make sure you're getting what you want out of this? Any ideas there?
I have a lot to say about what are the things that they actually need to be doing, and we're going to get into all that. But really, man, you asked such a great question, and even going back to your mom and your stepmom and what she her experience, and I 100% agree with her. I always say when I was younger in my clinical career, I would always get mad at the doctors. Get mad at these PCPs, like, do they not give a shit? Like what? Why is it just they just want you to be on this medication? That they told you can't beat this, and now I see it. It's clear as day in front of me. These doctors, these primary cares, but even these specialists, they're victims of a bigger problem in the healthcare system. I want to choose my words carefully here. It's a healthcare system that's set up to handle the problem in front of the patient because that's going to be met with the most instant gratification. And from a business model, that's a great business model. And that keeps people coming. I have a problem, fix it. And the problem that I have is the symptom in front of me. And so through many, many, many decades of heavy influence from the powers that be up top, and we all know pharmaceutical companies are massive and powerful and influence over FDA, influence over American Medical Association, influence over many other departments that are supposed to be making decisions that were the benefit for us are heavily being financially affected. So I think because of that, the system is flawed with short of insane, massive change up top in how we approach healthcare.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever going to be able to see a situation where the structure itself, because what it would need to look like, here's what it would need. So I'm talking about why it's never going to happen. But what it would need to look like is physicians would need to be paid to be able to spend the amount of time that's needed, which is usually 30 to 45 minutes, maybe even an hour with certain patients, to help them learn proper lifestyle interventions. That's not practical. So maybe group coaching, something like that, where insurance companies pay for it, because that's what the whole freaking point of insurance is supposed to be. So really, what we're doing right now and what many other groups do in the functional space, where they have to unfortunately charge people out of pocket prices, some version of that would have to be accepted by standard of care so that insurance companies would pay for it. Well, we all know that's never going to happen. That's all I could really say, because that's a problem that I just don't even see a path to solution. It's shitty that people have to pay out of pocket to get the care that they deserve. And I hope one day that we can do something to make holistic and functional healthcare more affordable. The thing that I highlight the most in the context of GLP-1, since we're talking about that, you want to save the most amount of money.
Yeah.
The coaching, the stuff that we teach, for example, this is an investment, because the goal for many people is medication independence. And GLP-1s are expensive as hell. So the access alone is a concern. I mean, you've seen what's going on with Eli Lilly and tirzepatide probably being off the market here pretty soon. But we still have semaglutide. How long before Novo Nordisk does the same thing and semaglutide's gone? So I think access alone should be a big reason, but then financial concerns should be an even bigger reason for anybody watching this to get your act together and really put as much effort as you can to implement these strategies, these functional strategies that really focus on becoming more insulin sensitive, reducing inflammation, and really getting to the root cause of your need for these medications to begin with.
When we're talking about these roadblocks and some of the issues that patients are facing, the rebound, right? The regain of weight. And this going years back to the fitness industry. If you're working hard and there's an ROI, you feel great. I mean, you're like, I'm on this train forever. This is it. I'm on track. I'm ready to go. As soon as there's a disruption and there's that fallback and the reversal of the trend and the results, it's almost as if the person is left in a worse state than when they started, because we know how much of all of this is a mental game. To claw yourself out of a hole only to fall right back in it when you're almost out of it, there's nothing that takes your steam away more than that. How are so many people having this rebound happen, and how the hell do they avoid it is I'm sure one of the biggest questions people are going to want an answer for and a solution to.
One of the main reasons why people find us and people start the flow protocol and our approach, because that's what I talk about probably every single day on my lives. We need to take a step back and define how the healthcare system looks at obesity and looks at these issues. They look at it as a chronic, irreversible disease, and which requires a lifelong medication. Now, I think that certainly fair to say that there is a certain amount of people that will need these medications for the rest of their lives. Couldn't agree more. What is that percentage? Is it 100%? No, that's bullshit. I will never accept that. Just ask any functional healthcare practitioner, and they will tell you, I help people beat obesity and diabetes all the time. Like, it literally happens all the time. But you ask Western medicine practitioners, like, it's not possible. I've never seen it. Well, what again is the difference in the dichotomy here? Western medicine practitioners will never see it, because the tools that they have, which we just talked about, it's not their fault, is very limited time and drugs. So of course they're never going to see it, because it's not in their practice. Functional practitioners are spending a tremendous amount of time. They're performing a wide set of tests that are very comprehensive: functional testing, stool testing, genetic testing, sometimes saliva for various, like a cortisol rhythm. And then they get more time to be able to help the patient implement it. This is the sad reality why functional programs can cost people sometimes $8,000 to $10,000 for a year of functional health. You don't need to keep spending it, but it's an investment. It's a huge investment to start with a functional practitioner, which is just unreasonable for the majority of people. But we're not talking about financial implications of being able to have access to it. We're just talking about what works here for a second, right?
Yeah.
Functional practitioners will tell you this happens all the time, but Western physicians and the data, because the data is here in this category, this bucket, they don't think it's possible. That's my background, as I've helped people in this category here. So I know it's possible. I've also lived it myself, so I have that viewpoint too as well, where I lost 100 pounds over 20 years ago, and I actually like yo-yoed for an entire decade, regaining, losing, And it wasn't until I come across fasting and realized, holy crap, and then I really pushed the envelope. And what I was doing with all the aggressive fasting was fixing my chronically elevated insulin levels, that hyperinsulinemia, because I didn't know I was insulin resistant. And I learned after I fixed it, because I can see myself after not fasting for a while begin to become resistant again, begin to start having that propensity to start gaining weight. Between what I've seen and then becoming a functional doctor and working with patients, this is all too common for me. Like when these medications blew up, because one big piece of the functional lifestyle is fasting, right? Like I'll focus on that. We don't have time to get into all of it, but I call it the 10 pillars of lasting weight loss. And fasting to me is one of the most powerful interventions, because we get our patients into weekly long rhythms of 36, 48-hour fasting every single week. It's insane. I say it, but it works. So, and we make it easy for people to get into that, because that's what GLP-1 medications do, is they suppress appetite. And then you stack the tirzepatide with something like AOD or some sort of fat mobilizing peptide. The combination of both of those make it really easy for an individual to get into the long fasting, to eat less processed foods, to eat less carbs, to adhere to a weight training program, follow a good supplement regimen. We already know these medications make it easier for people to follow these protocols. So what I'm doing here is taking what's always worked in the functional space, but then using science, using medicine, and just putting it together. And so what we've done very successfully is helped over thousands of individuals do just that, successfully wean off the medications and maintain their weight. So to answer your question, how can we actually do something that is thought of as not possible? Well, again, functional practitioners already do it. I'm just making it easier to do with the help of the medications. It's really that simple. So in summary, take what the wisdom that functional practitioners have already known, but make it a reality by accessing these powerful medications, powerful peptides, and putting them together in a program. And what's really cool is, because we're using peptides and medications, we don't have to go nearly as hardcore as many functional programs would otherwise require, because they're not using medications. They're not using these peptides. Just as much as I can bag on Western medicine and allopathic doctors for being so damn dogmatic, I could easily bag on functional doctors for being so dogmatic themselves. And I hear it from both ends, right? You're not a doctor. You're just a chiropractor. Stay in your lane. And then the functional doctor's like, what are you doing? It's like they feel betrayed, because I'm like preaching about medications and I thought you're functional. I'm like, whoa, I'm actually very functional. I just understand the reality and pitfalls of what's in front of you. And I'm trying to be practical. And maybe I can just see that because I lived it. I walked a mile in the shoes of an obese person, and I just embrace the science. So that's what we do, and we're doing it very successfully right now. We have a lot of individuals currently off the meds, maintaining their weight. They're in my Flow lifestyle community, where people are implementing the pillars. It's easier once you're at that point, but you still do lots of fasting. A little caveat to kind of wet your whistle if you're watching this. All those pillars matter, but one secret sauce, once you hit your weight loss goal, is we tell our patients to back up the weekly fasting, the 48 hours, and we implement a long fast, say once every 3 to 4 weeks. And what's crazy about that is that's the most advice that you'll hear other fasting experts say to do during your weight loss. And here I am saying, no, do it every week. Back off to once a month to help you maintain. Because how would you ever get insulin sensitive again if you're fasting for 48 hours once a month? Very challenging. This lifestyle gives you some wiggle room and some variety, because you're not so reliant on a perfect diet and a high amount of exercise. You just fast. And of course, implement everything else.
Yeah.
So
To go deeper on that, for those watching and for those who are already at that point where they've rebounded, which is a lot more than most people think, do you have any advice for them?
So for individuals who have already regained all their weight, or they're off the meds and they're in the middle of that process,
unfortunately,
and you're freaking out, you found out the hard way, unfortunately. Wherever you're at in that process, first of all, we got to get past the prior trauma of what happened. And I say trauma because you probably spent some money, you spent some time, you thought you made progress, and now you found out. And here I am. If you really embody what I'm saying, you realize, wow, I just wasted my time. I always try to be as positive as I possibly can. You did something, you implemented some better strategies. Like let's be as positive as you possibly can. But the truth of the matter is, wherever you're at now, whether you gained some, whether you gained all, or whether you're still on your medication and you're stuck because you don't want to stop the med because you don't want to start gaining weight, you need to start implementing the proper combination of lifestyle interventions that are going to help you fix insulin resistance, fix inflammation, become more fat adapted. Because we're playing in a field where these things aren't research to the nth degree where I can give you the perfectly science-backed protocol, we are using wisdom and experience to find the right combination. A lot of these things we know work for most people. And I'd love it and wish and hope one day that we do have all this stuff backed up with literature so we can have the perfect protocol. But again, that's never going to happen because we don't have a big company making money off of researching these sort of lifestyle interventions. So they're always going to be shunned. They're always going to be denied. And you're either going to be the individual who's going to listen to what the powers that be tell you, or you're going to be someone that says, man, either I believe you and I'm all in, or what other option do I have? I don't believe you and I'm skeptical, but I want this. And what they're telling me to do, which is take the med for the rest of my life, at least you're giving me a shot. Even though I don't believe you, let me just try, because what's the worst that can happen? I can always go back to the med. I always say you will never win a game that you're not willing to play.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you in order to successfully learn how to ride that horse, you have to be willing to fall. But guess what? If you fall, you can always get back on the horse.
Right.
Like this whole idea that I'm, going back to the chronic irreversible thing, like, okay, you hit your weight loss goal, you need the medication for maintenance, but what about 3 months later? What about 6 months later,
Mm-hmm.
9 months later? You have a crystal ball and you can tell me that that individual is going to need the medication for the rest of your life. Man, the only thing is that's guaranteed in life is death and taxes. That's what I always say. So the narrative, I think, also needs to flip. There is a potential combination of lifestyle interventions in the category of what we're talking about. And I think we've really laid out the majority of them. And I should never stop trying. Life is very dynamic. Stress levels change. Advancements in science change. New things and understandings come out. And so you should never give up that battle if you are somebody in that place. We gotta get to the basics. We gotta become more insulin sensitive. And I say those three things because I think those are the most important. Insulin resistance and inflammation are the big two. And then I would say becoming fat adapted is sort of that third category that is vitally important, that metabolic flexibility component.
The second piece that you mentioned, or the second hurdle, the plateau. The body is the only machine in the universe that literally gets better with proper use. Um, Sometimes that can play to a detriment, right? But if you
Yeah.
take a star high school football linebacker, drop him into a water polo practice and have him join the 400-meter warm up, that's different mechanics at a microscopic level, different muscle innervation is what I was trying to say. That's different mechanics, different muscle innervation at a microscopic scale. That's even a different type of challenge to the cardiorespiratory system. I'm speaking from experience because I'm talking about my first practice in water polo coming from football. My coach said he thought he was going to have to jump in after me during the first practice, right? And I was healthy, I was in shape. And that just goes to show how a different stimulus can affect everyone's body so differently. Now, when it comes to weight loss, this plays to more of a detriment when people are doing the same things, or sometimes in their eyes, more. There's more output, there's a better diet, there's a higher dose of medication, yet a hindrance of the results and eventually a cessation altogether, right? How the hell do you manage that? And why does that even happen when these medications are being increased in dose? Like, what's going on here?
You made me think of Dr. David Sinclair, very well known in the anti-aging space. To quote him, the body is a coping mechanism. The human body was meant to cope and adapt to stress. And so the absence of continual stressors actually leads to a degradation of health. Now, that to me is so beautiful. And it really makes sense. And it even gets down to the epigenetic expression, just like meaning like, so we have genes, we know in our DNA there's a blueprint, there's a code for and everything, and even our propensity to develop certain diseases. And the epigenetic expression is sort of this newer understanding that just as important as it is which genes you have or don't is the conversation of which ones are turned on or turned off. The worst genes in the world, but if the ones that are actually bad or turned off, you would never know.
Mhm.
You would look just as good as a person who doesn't have those. The big takeaway from epigenetics is lifestyle influences the expression, the turning on, the turning off of certain genes, which is translatable to future generations below us. You inherit this from your parents. Going back to the weight loss plateau and what you're asking, the weight loss plateau is, or starvation mode, is such a powerful mechanism. And everything that I'm going to go over now is just as applicable to you if you are not on the medications or not. But I've never seen so many freaking zombies as I see now. Why do I say zombies? Because the classic presentation of somebody in a weight loss plateau, especially on these GLP-1s, but even off of it, starvation mode comes along with it. Yes, the weight loss rate slows down and then downright completely stops. Sometimes they even start gaining weight. They become very tired, very exhausted, brain foggy, constipated, feeling cold, achy body. So you think of a zombie, it's like literal, like they're becoming zombies.
Almost sounds like hypothyroidism.
It's exactly hypothyroidism. So you beat me to the punch, which is great. So this is a literal hypothyroid situation. And I actually explain it to people because it gives them context, right? In your brain, that the more that you can compare things to, the easier it is to understand. A completely new concept that you've never heard before, that you have nothing to compare it to, is a really challenging concept. So I'm glad you mentioned that. This is hypothyroidism. True hypothyroidism has many causes, but the end result is that many individuals have to take medication for the rest of their life. If you need that, you better take medication. This is because I don't really call it a medication, it's a hormone.
Right.
So we got to understand there's a difference, right? Thyroid hormone is in your body. We really shouldn't call it a medication, so that's actually a mistake. It's a hormone. Don't be afraid of getting that hormone, because if you need it, the consequences are dire if you don't have it. And I'll give context to that. So we have trillions of cells in the human body, and every single cell has a receptor for thyroid hormones. So this is why thyroid is senior to testosterone, senior to estrogen, senior to progesterone. And we've seen how powerful with BHRT therapy is, what testosterone can do. Thyroid is senior because not every single cell has a receptor for those three, but every single cell has a receptor for thyroid. Thyroid activation to a single cell and all trillions of your cells are what causes the mitochondria, which is like the battery, the powerhouse in your cell. The mitochondria, as you maybe have heard, is where we produce our energy. Well, the machinery within the mitochondria, that whole process, the electron transport chain, what's activating it is thyroid activation. Due to thyroid activation, the mitochondria can crank, the electron transport chain can run, and the very smallest broken down parts of the food go in, and out comes ATP, which is usable energy. Well, less thyroid activation means less mitochondrial activation, which means less ATP. That sounds pretty bad, because now we're talking so much more than just weight loss or difficulty losing weight, because yes, this translates to your metabolic rate and you're burning less calories. But now you understand why the symptom of hypothyroidism is a really long list of various symptoms, because all your systems in your body are basically being forced to run off less energy. And this is where zombie mode comes in. Now, the good news about this is like a type of hypothyroidism. The good news about zombie mode, the good news about this weight loss plateau, is it's totally correctable in most cases without having to get on hormones. And you only want to use hormones when you absolutely need them, right? And you know how I feel about hormones. In most cases, you have to use real hormones to fix the symptoms. You're not going to improve your lifestyle and improve your hormones that much. But in this case, this is actually an example of when you can. We can get into the very, very specific science. It's not exactly the same. Like, it's not so much that your body decreases in thyroid production in this weight loss plateau. It's what's actually happening is your body increases production of reverse T3, which is sort of this other guy that blocks the activation. So you still have the thyroid hormone, but it's being blocked. None of that's really relevant, because the end result is still less thyroid activation. But in case anybody was listening that just wanted to, I wanted them to understand that the end result is hypothyroidism, regardless of whether it's higher reverse T3 or it's actually depleted low hormones. It's the same result. Before I became a clinician and before GLP-1s, I was managing gyms and like thousands of personal trainers. And so seeing starvation mode, we would see it occasionally. I mean, for your experience in the gyms, how often would you see somebody actually literally starving themselves? It's hard to do, right? Yeah, it's so hard to do. Like, you're always like impressed almost. Like, you tell you, by the way, you got to eat more, right? It takes a very neurotic very mentally tough person to starve themselves without these
Mm-hmm.
medications, because you know how hungry you get.
It's painful.
It's painful. It's painful. So that's why it was always blew my mind to see someone do that. Like, you're only eating 800 calories without appetite
Mm-hmm.
suppressants. That's wild. Now we see it all too commonly because these medications are so damn powerful that you have people literally walking around eating sometimes even less than the amount of calories they should be consuming. Your average human should be eating about 2,000 calories, but I see people coming in and we, get them to count their calories
Mm-hmm.
and they're like eating 800 and they're like, I can't eat more. Like, they're always like, you want me to eat more? I can barely eat my 800. I'm like, you have no idea that this is actually significantly less than the amount of energy you should be eating, you should be consuming. Well, how would they know? Because their body is artificially impacted by the drug, by the peptide. And I'm not saying that in a context that's not a good thing. That's just the things that we got to be aware of. That's a little bit of the dark side. In a perfect world, you're medicating in a range that takes the pathologic I can't stop eating and supposed to take it to I have control. It's not supposed to take it from pathologic I can't stop eating to I can't eat, which is part of the problem here.
Mm-hmm.
That's that coupled with, and that's going to lead to the third topic of they're being used wrong, which goes back to our original problem of the whole healthcare system. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
people are getting these medications, they're not getting coached, they're not getting guided, they're not getting the proper advice, so they don't know anything about like energy balance and how that works and how to fix insulin. And so the end result is massive undereating and complete lack of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So until they plateau, and then they try to figure it out. And I'll save this more for the third topic, but they're met with the answer of just increase the dose, just increase the dose, and we'll talk more about that. But if you're watching this and you're in a weight loss plateau, whether or not it's from GLP-1 medications or whether it's just you actually were the person who starved yourself without the medications. The way to fix this is what I call a reset or a reverse diet. So this is where you establish how many calories you're eating. Say you find out you're eating 800 or 1,000, and then you take your time. Week by week, you increase your caloric intakes by 2, maybe 300 calories. So let's say you find out you're eating 1,000. Week number 1, your target is to eat 1,200. Week number 2, 1,400. Week number 3, 1,600, and then 1,800, and then 2,000. So this process can take 3 to 6 weeks, depending on how severely they were under eating
Mm-hmm.
and how high they should be eating, how much they should be eating, which we said 2,000 is the average. That particular number is a simple formula. You go on Google, type in TEE, total energy expenditure, which, by the way, is always a little higher than it should be, like by like 10-15%, but get somewhere close to that number. And what you'll notice as you're increasing your calories, this is so cool. First of all, you won't gain weight. Like it almost never happens that people are gaining weight, and they're always so freaked out in the beginning because they're so scared and they started gaining weight before. But the reason why you're not gaining weight in this case is because the way we're doing it is very slow and methodical. It took time for your body to get into starvation mode. It takes time for your body to get out of starvation mode. And so what we're trying to do is create that signal to the body. And at some point, the body goes, oh, that was a metaphorical body speaking. I'm no longer starving. All right, let's crank things up. I don't want to be metabolically downregulated. I know that as a body, I need to use more energy, right? So the body wants to get out of this plateau. So slowly increase your calories over time, and your weight will maintain. Sometimes people even will lose weight, which is also really cool too as well. But generally, they're maintaining weight. They're feeling much better. They're coming out of zombie mode. Energy levels are increasing. Brain fog is decreasing. They start pooping more, feeling less cold, feeling more vibrant. Because guess what? Your body comes out of starvation mode. That reverse T3, that blocker, starts to decrease. You go back to normal, where you were at before. And now you can get back into a weight loss protocol, hopefully done correctly, so you don't go right back into it. But this is the solution. It works like magic. And just a little side note, we made it sound like it's all about called macronutrients and micronutrients. So you could have a micronutrient issue be the culprit here. So macro just means the actual energy, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. But then food also has micronutrients, and micronutrients are like your vitamins, your minerals, your antioxidants. And so sometimes it could be a lack of the phytonutrients, which kind of goes hand in hand with the macronutrients, because as you're eating more calories, especially if you're eating whole nutritious food, you'll get your micronutrients in, and one of those things, are usually a combination of both, is what triggers your body. Okay, I'm no longer starving. Let's kick things back into gear.
Okay. You could do a dissertation on this, and I'm not going to ask you to do that. But you did mention thyroid, and there are so many questions on that, and I know you can speak to it, and I think it's very valuable. So, one, can you just briefly speak to the type of tests that someone should be looking for the thyroid, for the real answers? And two, from a health supplement perspective and from a medication perspective. So, your feelings on managing hypothyroidism, even sometimes Hashimoto's with selenium, and even if you're non-reactive, iodine, and the choices between leothyronine, NP-thyroid, levothyroxine, synthroid, that are those last two given out like candy. Just your thoughts around navigating that.
Yeah, no, might as well, because we talked a lot about thyroid already, so it will be easier to dive into this. The just Google, like, the, my doctor says my thyroid's okay, but I have the symptoms, right? So the symptoms, again, guys, if you have half or more of these symptoms, you are very likely hypothyroid, whether it be weight loss plateau hypothyroid, or be there's many causes, right? And some of them require medication. So difficulty losing weight, brain fog, tiredness, achy body, constipation, feeling cold, oily skin, dry skin, hair loss, brittle skin and nails, just off my head. And there's probably a few more too as well. So if you have half or more of those symptoms, you don't even need a test to know something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in your head. You didn't psychologically manifest and produce these symptoms. It's not just, oh, it's just you're getting old. No, it's likely a thyroid, and you would objectively diagnose it with a test. So here's the problem with the healthcare system. I feel like I say that a lot. I feel like we say that a lot, don't we? There's a problem with the healthcare system.
I think it's perfect.
I know. I know. Maybe we should try to be nicer. But I just, the test that they do on your standard routine labs is called TSH. And so TSH is not even your thyroid hormone. TSH stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, thyroid stimulating hormone is sort of a precursor produced by a pituitary gland, and it is produced, floats around, and then activates the thyroid gland to then produce thyroid hormone. This is all they do. And so like, think of TSH as like a net that you throw out, and it's going to catch, and this is just an arbitrary guess. If you guys have a different statistic and maybe any data to back it up, let me know. But arbitrarily, I would probably guess 65%, which is a big number, right? And maybe it used to be higher before, and now everybody's all screwed up and toxic, and maybe that's why TSH's effectiveness at catching most hypothyroid people, maybe that's the problem and needs to be updated. I don't know. But TSH is not going to catch a lot of people, because 35% of the entire population is a massive number. So we know what TSH should do in a hypothyroid situation, and so that's how we can diagnose it. But the problem is that there's many cases where TSH is not doing the thing that would objectively tell us, hey, this patient's hypothyroid, yet they are. And for whatever reason, the presentation of the symptoms aren't enough to convince the insurance companies. And we know that they're doing everything they can to not pay for us for anything if they could. So many people are not getting diagnosed because of the limitation of TSH alone. That's the biggest right there. That's the biggest. There's more though. There's a smaller category too, still worth mentioning. For people that are on medication, they are still experiencing these symptoms. And so the next lab after TSH is there's three more. Reverse T3, we kind of mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. Actual thyroid hormones, free fraction T3 and free T4. You could do total T4 and total T3, very similar to T3, T4. Mm-hmm. So free T3 and free T4. So we need to understand the difference. So both of them are active thyroid hormones, but T3 is, I think I read, like 150 to 200 times more biologically active than T4. Mm-hmm. So basically T3 is the end all be all of your thyroid activation, your metabolism, but T4 does some other crazy stuff and a little bit of thyroid activation. Well, in your body, the majority of T3 comes from the conversion of T4. In a healthy body, work all day. Your body makes a little bit of T3, tiny little bit, but it gets most of it by converting T4 to T3. It's a very involved, enzymatically driven process. So the thought process, I guess, from somebody at some point was, well, let's just give them T4, levothyroxine, the number one prescribed thyroid medication. And so if all the person needed was T4, or if the person's body would
If they could convert it.
yeah. So the what they're assuming is happening is the body is converting it, and for healthy individuals, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
But we have the second category where the net failed to grab is the underconverters. The underconverters are screwed. This is why the actual prescriptions should we don't ever do levothyroxine. We're doing like an Armour thyroid or an NP thyroid, which is an actual desiccated product, comes from pork from pigs' thyroid glands, and it has T1, T2, T3, T4, all of that. And if we need to get more specific, sometimes we can actually have a blend from our compounding pharmacy produce the right ratio of T3 to
Mm-hmm.
T4. So based off labs, based off symptoms. So this is the second category of people that are screwed by conventional medicine. And then finally, there's a third category, which we bring it back to reverse T3. So reverse T3 is a very interesting, the body's full of like regulatory systems,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a reason why it's there. So what we know about reverse T3 is when the body is stressed, it could usually be an infection, it could be sickness, it could be, it could be toxic exposure. Reverse T3, it fits into those receptor sites and attaches and blocks the effect of
Mm-hmm.
T3. Got a higher affinity. So you could have even your T3 and T4 look good, TSH look good, but if you're not checking reverse T3, because that's usually the next thing is some people will check the T3, T4, and they won't include the reverse T3. That seems to be like the one like that you have to be really functional and really understand this. We check reverse T3 on every single patient because I think it's so important, especially because we talked about how we're dealing with lasting weight loss, and reverse T3 actually helps us understand whether their hypothyroidism might be related to the plateau
Mm-hmm.
and not, because we don't want to medicate it. They don't need it, right? Versus true hypothyroidism. So reverse T3 is vitally important. And if somebody does have high reverse T3 and everything else looks fine, giving them more medication is not going to help them. And so we got to figure out what's causing the high reverse T3. Is there some sort of infection or not? But in the meantime, there's some high quality various supplements that can help with that. If we have more time, we would get into that maybe on the next show.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certain supplements we can give them, but then at least it gives us an opportunity to kind of like, okay, let's try to find what's going on. And that's hopefully we can. Sometimes we can't. Yeah, I think in a nutshell, that really helps us understand and probably blends with the understanding of the plateau situation too.
Thank you for that. The reason I wanted you to expand, even from a personal perspective, as you know, me and my wife did IVF. I'm going to be a father in 4 months, which
Oh
is
man, that's super awesome.
incredible, especially coming from a guy who never wanted to be a dad ever till recently. And had I not had this background, had I not had access to the labs that we do and the providers that we have, I'm pretty confident we would have still been in the testing, try different prescription phase, and not even to the implantation phase yet. And you can ask her; she knows this too. And I just got lucky,
Yeah.
and I think about everyone else who not only doesn't have access, just doesn't know this because the information isn't presented. And so I do hope listeners are really paying attention here because it's just one of those things that isn't part of the general public interpretation and understanding, and it's critical. It really is. Going on to your last point, I've always believed that your success triangle is a combination of accountability, motivation, and knowledge. You have those three things, it doesn't really matter what the task at hand is, you're set up for success. And you mentioned the guidance, the proper use. That's the same thing, right? And a lot of people taking these GLPs, they're online, they're getting them from research companies. And you know what? I won't even knock that right now because I get finances play a role, but you got to have some type of guidance, right? You got to know what you're doing. And so with that, how does one receive the proper information and what does that look like?
Unfortunately goes back to that original problem that we talked about, that the entire system would need to change for the majority, for there to be uniformity among the delivery. So it's not,
Right.
the healthcare system is going to continue feeding us this narrative which conveniently used to be that there was no disease, and it used to be an issue with us. We're the problem. Stop eating. Go exercise. Like we were all led to believe that and felt like shit. And now all of a sudden they have the drug, and now it's a disease. Anyways, we all know why that is. But kudos, they finally figured out it really is a disease. It's just the narrative. The narrative that it's irreversible is just bullshit. And I for somebody who's lived it and walked through the shoes, it's always, I think that's what really fuels me, is because I know it is reversible. And now I think it's more reversible than it's ever been because we have the functional know-how and we have the powerful medications and peptides to give us the combination to get it done. So, what do you do though, right? Because like we said, so for the financially constrained individuals, if you're lucky enough to get it covered by insurance, okay, great. So now you got to seek the information, you got to seek the guidance. And I think there's not a lot of options out there. Dr. Tina Moore is the only other clinician that I know. I swear, when I heard her talk, I thought I was listening to my older female doppelganger, and for lack of better words. But I mean, we're completely identical in terms of how we look at this. She has such an extensive background with her personally doing the stem cells and the peptides and the hormones. And I've worked side by side my clinicians in our practice doing the peptides, doing the hormones. We did neuropathy therapy, we did stem cells and regenerative medicine. So it's like we have this identical background. And, I barely heard of her like 4 months ago. And that's the best for anybody watching this. That's, if you already know who she is, then you know us, because it's identical. She doesn't see patients, so we are. And so I think you just need to, whether you work with us, whether you do it on your own, we have a ton of free resources for everybody watching this if you want to start there. But you need to implement these lifestyle interventions, and I'll just list them. We don't have time to get into them, but there's just 10 of them. I call them the 10 pillars of lasting weight loss: eating less processed foods, eating less carbohydrates, the flow fasting protocol, aka aggressive fasting, lifting heavy weights, a structured weight training regimen, a good supplement protocol to address those micronutrient deficiencies, fixing inflammation issues, addressing any hormonal issues, optimizing your sleep, handling your stress management techniques, and then mindset. Like, and I'm probably going to come up with 11 and 12. I mean, I'm, these are all important, and you don't necessarily need to have a perfectly executed regimen of all 10 of them. Just start implementing them one by one, or two at a time, whatever you can do. Because again, we are playing a little bit of darts here, and we're just trying to throw these things that are safe and hope that we come up with the right combination, a right pattern that works for you. I can tell you, because I've helped thousands of people follow this protocol. And the big four, or the first four that I mentioned, the insulin resistance, the inflammation, well, not the pillars, but those are the things that the pillars handle, is inflammation, insulin resistance. Those are the two things that these pillars are handling. We just got to find the right combination of those things that handle those two enough for the individual in front of us. And every individual is different. Their insulin resistance might not actually be a lifestyle issue. It might be purely toxic exposure. Well, you got to go out there and find that, right? And so I think that's not what we specialize in. And so generally, when I have an individual that we just cannot, implementing the pillars doesn't fix it, I refer out to a very specialized functional practitioner who does the deep testing, because at that point, that's the only option for the patient, because something else is driving your insulin resistance. But for most people, these pillars will absolutely solve, I think, most individuals' weight loss struggles, because it focuses on insulin resistance. And you got to find a clinic who understands these approaches towards GLP-1s, because the problem that I see with the practitioners out there, and I get it, is they're following they're following the research, which I get it. You're technically supposed to do that most of the time, but you're also supposed to be able to think like a clinician, right? If doctors were meant to just literally follow protocols, they wouldn't be doctors. Doctors become doctors to think critically, to think on their feet, to use the data, to use the research, but look at what's in front of them and think critically. And sometimes critically means what's not in the research, or what maybe hasn't been proven. And I think the GLP-1 space, because so many doctors are doing it as like an add-on service. You got your med spas who weren't even doing this, and all of a sudden now they're weight loss clinics, and you got freaking surgeons. You got all these other doctors that completely outside their discipline. No hate on you. I'm a DC, and here I am, so no hate on you. But you got all this other stuff that you're doing, and all of a sudden now you're doing weight loss. My point of that statement was that they're not they don't have a coaching program to help these patients implement it. So for them, it's easy to just say, well, the protocol is every 4 weeks, just increase the dose. Every 4 weeks, just increase the dose. This is all I do is coach people. This is all I do besides, organizing the business and everything. It's coaching patients these lifestyles. So over 20 years and my own struggles, I feel pretty qualified to be able to help guide people. And I was fortunate enough to work with medical practitioners who think like me. And the concepts of microdosing your GLP-1s, by the way, is worth mentioning because it's a very popular thing now that people are asking us about. And quick answer is you can't microdose at the beginning unless you're already in good shape, unless you're already relatively healthy. You're metabolically busted. Microdose is not going to do much. But we can use microdosing at the end of the protocol. We can get them to their weight loss goal. One of our main philosophies is the lowest dose possible. That's a whole other thing that you don't get. We're not dogmatically following that template. Absolutely. I've had a handful of patients have to work up damn near the high end of the range, but my practitioners make sure if they're moving somebody that high, it's because nothing else seems to be working. And that is what makes sense at that point after we've exhausted all of their measures. Unequivocally, that's not what's happening at all. People are just getting dosed up and they're being told to increase, like that example I told you. So, putting that all together, you want to work with us, we'll help you do this right. Great. You want to take advantage of our free resources, you want to go learn what Dr. Tina Moore is doing, but you gotta put it together in a protocol like that. And besides her and us, I don't know who else is really looking at the medications like that, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah.
So
I like to always finish off with something that the viewers can always really take home that's concrete and solid. And I think last question I asked you was, out of everything in your experience, the one most influential practice that had the most effect, and that was fasting. So today, just because this is a repeating theme more so lately, for those who are up there in dosing, taking like 15 milligrams already, they've noticed the weight start to slow in terms of the loss. They're sluggish. Maybe they felt the constipation. They're a little cold. They're irritated. What is a crucial first step in an effort to reverse that situation?
if you're in a plateau, you're in a plateau, right? Regardless of the dose of the medication. It just sucks when you're on a plateau at the maxed out dose versus that 2.5. Usually when people are on a plateau and they're on a lower end of the range, they usually make a decision on their own to take a break from the medication. And so many awesome things happen when you take a break from the medication. Number one, you resensitize to it. Number two, you get to feel what real hunger feels like. And that goes back to the mindset piece, because the ability to control your cravings and hunger is a skill that requires training. And when you suppress your hunger to the nth degree, you lose that ability to handle hunger. So you come back to what is now less hunger, but is perceived by you as more hunger. Kind of like the whole thing of pulling your hand out of cold water and putting it back into the same water, but that water feels different because it came out of a larger scale change in temperature. So relative difference is real here. So we think of that in our programs because we're reminding people taking a break is nice because you get to feel hunger again. And it's also a test. Where are you at mindset wise, and what is the end all be all? Do you come back and feel ravenously out of control? Or do you come back and you're like, whoa, I feel good. I actually feel like in control, which happens a lot more often than people think. Everybody thinks they're going to just turn into this nonstop eating nom, 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 and it doesn't happen as much as you think. Either way, the reset only takes as long as it takes. Now, for anybody in the 15 milligram dose, you're going to have to talk to your provider, and I would never tell anybody. I don't tell people to wean off medications. This is my medical practitioners, but people, and even my medical practitioners can't advise if they're getting it from someone else, But if I were doing a reset and I was stuck on 50 milligrams, I would maybe jump to half of that dose, maybe go from 15 to 10 to 5 to 0, because I want to give myself that break. But because it's such a lot, it's going to be a huge hit to the body. So I would definitely take your time with it. You could technically do the reset and stay on the max dose the entire time. And it's certainly an option. And I don't have even enough clinical experience to say whether I think one is better than the other. I've seen it go both ways. So that ultimately it's a decision for the patient to make based off of where they think they were at before, how out of control were they, and where they think they're at now. Either way, you complete the reset, you get back onto the lowest dose possible, and you execute on the pillars of lasting weight loss.
That's perfect, man. Thanks a lot. See you next
Absolutely.
time.
We'll see you guys later.